Walk outside right now. Step into your backyard at midnight. Nothing happens. No claws in the dark, no eyes watching you from the bushes, no sound of something circling closer. You don't even think about it, but for almost the entire history of our species, that exact walk would have gotten you killed. For roughly 2 million years, our ancestors lived inside a food chain that did not put them anywhere near the top. They were slow. They had no claws, no fangs, no thick hide, no horns. A chimpanzee has stronger arms. A gazelle has more speed. Compared to almost every predator hunting the African savanna, a human body was an easy meal wrapped in soft skin. So how did a species this defenseless make it all the way to you? The fossil record gives us an answer, and it is not the one most people expect. In 1924, a skull was pulled out of a limestone quarry in Taung, South Africa. It belonged to a child, an early hominin species called Australopithecus africanus, roughly 2.8 million years old. For decades, scientists studied the skull as a landmark in human origins, without looking closely at the damage on it. Then in 1995, paleoanthropologists Lee Berger and Ronald Clark re-examined the fossil and found something unsettling. The puncture marks on the skull matched the talons of a large bird of prey. Specifically, they match the pattern left by modern black eagles when they kill and carry off monkeys today. The Taung Child, one of the most famous fossils in the story of human evolution, had very likely been snatched from the ground and eaten by a bird. That was not an isolated case. At a site called Swartkrans, also in South Africa, paleontologist C.K. Brain spent years studying a cave packed with the bones of early hominins. In 1981, he published a theory that reframed the entire site. The cave wasn't a hominin shelter, it was a leopard's den. Leopards drag their kills into caves and trees to eat them undisturbed, away from competitors. Brain found a hominin pelvis bone with 2 puncture marks pressed into it. He matched the spacing of those punctures to the lower canines of a fossil leopard found at the same site. The fit was almost exact. Whatever lived around Swartkrans was not hiding from leopards. It was being hunted by them generation after generation. And our ancestors weren't only dodging predators, they were competing with some of them for the same scraps. Lions and hyenas stripped carcasses on the same plains where early humans scavenged marrow from leftover bones, which meant every meal carried a second risk, showing up to a kill site at the wrong moment and becoming the next one. Leopards weren't even the worst of it. Bones at several South African sites turn up alongside the remains of an extinct saber-toothed cat called defenseless, a name that translates roughly to terrible cat. Some researchers have gone as far as nicknaming defenseless the hominid hunter, based on how often its remains appear at the same sites as early human ancestors. We can't say for certain it specialized in hunting hominins, but we know it was built to kill exactly the kind of animal our ancestors were: mid-sized, slow, and carrying no natural weapons at all. The same pattern shows up an ocean of time later, on a completely different continent. When Neanderthals spread across Ice Age Europe, they shared their landscape with cave hyenas, pack-hunting scavengers powerful enough to crack open bones that even lions struggle with. Researchers studying hyena den sites across Europe have found Neanderthal remains mixed in with the bones of horses, deer, and other prey animals, gnawed and broken in the same characteristic way. At several of these sites, the damage patterns suggest the hyenas weren't just scavenging Neanderthal bodies after death. They were hunting living Neanderthals, the same way they hunted everything else sharing their territory. Wherever in the world our ancestors lived, whatever shape they had evolved into, the predators around them had not stopped seeing them as food. By the 1990s, this evidence had built into something hard to ignore. In 2005, anthropologists Robert Sussman and Donna Hart published a book that pulled it all together, called Man the Hunted. Their argument was simple and uncomfortable. For most of our evolutionary history, we were not the hunters sitting at the top of the food chain. We were prey. Hart and Sussman went through the fossil record site by site and found a striking proportion of early hominin remains carrying tooth marks, puncture wounds, and damage patterns consistent with predator kills rather than natural death. Being eaten, they argued, wasn't a rare misfortune for our ancestors. It was a routine, expected part of life. So if our ancestors were this exposed, this slow, this poorly armed, how is it that any of them survived long enough to become us? The first answer most people reach for is tools. Sharpened stones, spears, weapons, and tools mattered. But tools alone don't explain it, because a sharpened stick does very little against a leopard that can outrun you, outclimb you, and see in the dark far better than you ever will. Something else had to be doing the heavier lifting. Part of the answer is in your shoulder. In 2013, biologist Neil Roach and his colleagues published a study in the journal Nature on the evolution of the human shoulder joint. They found that around 2 million years ago, the shoulder changed shape in a way that let our ancestors throw projectiles at extremely high speed, far faster than any chimpanzee or gorilla can manage even today. A human can throw a rock hard enough to genuinely injure or deter a predator from a safe distance, something almost no other primate can do. That single anatomical shift turned a defenseless animal into one that could fight back without ever getting close enough to be killed. Fire did the rest of the work. Most mammals carry an instinctive aversion to open flame, wired in long before they ever encounter a human. Once our ancestors controlled fire, every campsite campsite became a kill-free zone roughly 30 feet wide that predators had no instinct to cross. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer groups have recorded the same pattern today. People who wander outside the firelight at night are far more likely to be attacked. Inside it, almost never. Site selection mattered just as much as fire. Archaeologists studying early sleeping and living sites in South Africa, including caves like Sibudu and Border Cave, have noted a consistent pattern. People chose locations with a single narrow entrance, elevated ground, and a clear sightline over the surrounding terrain, the same features a modern security guard would look for in a building. A cave with one entrance only has one direction a predator can come from, and a raised vantage point gives a group time to see trouble coming before it arrives. None of that required tools or fire. It just required paying attention to geography and passing that knowledge down. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. Tools and fire and clever shelter explain how an individual defended himself in a single moment. They don't explain how an entire species survived 2 million straight years of being this vulnerable. The real answer isn't a weapon at all. It's each other. A lone hominin in the open was an easy kill. A cluster of them, sleeping pressed together, watching in every direction, calling out the instant something moved in the grass, was a completely different problem for a predator to solve. This is the same many eyes principal ecologists have documented across the animal kingdom for decades. The larger and more alert the group, the lower the odds any single individual gets singled out. Among living primates, researchers studying vervet monkeys have shown that they maintain entire vocabularies of distinct alarm calls, different sounds for a leopard, a snake, or an eagle, so the whole troop knows exactly what kind of danger is coming and how to respond. Many anthropologists consider this kind of shared, specific warning system one of the deep evolutionary roots of human language itself. That same coordination shows up in how groups handled a predator that was already close. Anthropologists who have spent time with modern hunter-gatherer groups like the Hadza in Tanzania have documented something that looks almost reckless on its surface. When a lion or hyena tries to claim a kill the group is butchering, the whole party doesn't scatter. They group up, shout, throw rocks, and advance together until the predator backs off. A strategy that works specifically because predators are wired to read group confidence and group size as a warning sign, not an opportunity. A scattered, panicking group looks like prey. A unified one looks like a threat not worth the injury risk. Sussman and Hart's own argument doesn't stop at "we were hunted." It goes further. They propose that constant predation pressure is one of the forces that pushed early hominins toward intense cooperation, shared vigilance, and tighter social bonds in the first place. In other words, the same threat that should have wiped us out may be one of the reasons we became this social, this alert to each other, this dependent on group living to begin with. The fear didn't just make us cautious, it may have helped make us us. That kind of pressure leaves a mark that doesn't show up in any fossil. It shows up in you. The instinct to flinch at a sudden noise behind you in the dark. The unease of walking through tall grass you can't see through. The specific, irrational dread of something underwater that you cannot see, even in a calm swimming pool. None of that is random. It's 2 million years of being prey, compressed into a nervous system that never got the memo that the predators are mostly gone. Walk outside again tonight. Step into the dark without a second thought. Nothing happens, because for the first time in the history of our species, almost nothing can. But somewhere underneath that calm, your body is still running an old program, one built across millions of nights when stepping outside the firelight could be the last decision you ever made. We didn't outlast the lions and the leopards because we were strong. We outlasted them because we learned, long before we ever had a word for it, that none of us was ever supposed to face the dark alone.